Do you see the "This Way Out" sign back there? It's weird. I never look back there. It's over there. We keep asking that question on the show. This way out? So I thought maybe it should get its own sign. Has a question mark, as in, dude, we're entering year 7 in Iraq and we're in year 8 in Afghanistan. Are we getting any closer to finding the way out? So we made a sign. For Iraq, the president has at least told us when we will get to the way out. We will get to it not by the end of this year, not by the end of next year, but by the end of the year after that. That's Iraq. For Afghanistan, we're still waiting to hear. But through our This Way Out effort, which I'm pretty sure is total cable news suicide, we are making an ongoing effort to introduce everyone to the people who are driving this effort to figure out what to do, the people leading the decisions about what is going to happen in our nation's wars, which President Bush started, but which President Obama may finish. On last night's show, we had one of those influential decision leaders on, John Nagl, who wrote the Counterinsurgency Field Manual along with General Petraeus. Check out how Mr. Nagl did not even flinch when I raised the prospect of another 8 years in the war in Afghanistan. Tell me that when the next president is inaugurated, we are not going to be talking about prospects for year 16 of the war in Afghanistan.
I'd like to be able to tell you that, Rachel. I'm afraid that American interests in Afghanistan are going to remain. We've got an awful lot of work to do in front of us. I'm afraid more in front of us than behind us in this war in Afghanistan.
We don't even get to start looking for the way out of Afghanistan until year 16 of that war. What's more, the field manual that John Nagl helped to write says that we need a combined U.S.-Afghan security force of, say, 600 to 750,000 troops on the ground in Afghanistan. That's more than triple what, by any conceivable counting, we've got now. This is really the only way to win in Afghanistan? Meanwhile, the American public seem to be moving on. A new Gallup poll out this week shows 42% of Americans think it was a mistake to send U.S. troops to Afghanistan in the first place. That is the highest that number has ever been since they started polling on it in 2001. Joining us now is Dr. David Kilcullen, a military strategist who has been a senior advisor to David Petraeus and the State Department. His latest book is called The Accidental Guerrilla, Fighting Small Wars in the Midst of a Big One. David Kilcullen, thanks for coming back on the show.
Very happy to be here.
All right. It's 1996. You're in Indonesia. You are studying a guerrilla movement there. It's midnight. These 4 young guys walk up to your campsite. Then what happens?
Yeah, I was kind of hanging out in the middle. It's this very wild part of West Java. There are 22 peaks above 10,000 feet in this one little bit of jungle, and half of them are volcanoes. You know, so it's a pretty wild place. Yeah, it's midnight. I've been out in the jungle for a week, and I'm just trying to take a break. And these guys pay me a visit. 2 of them were local guys from the valley where I was staying, associated with a movement called Darul Islam, which was 1950s, 1960s guerrilla group, which I was studying. The other 2 were Arabs, and we spent several hours talking and trying to explore the issues of the local area. The Arabs got pretty bored with that, and one of them said to me, hang on a second, forget all this discussion. What about Israel? What about the United States? What about Western culture undermining the Muslim world? What do you have to say about that? And they started putting me through a fairly rigorous stress test of my views. And for whatever reason, I seem to have given them acceptable answers, because they left peacefully a couple of hours later. But I got thinking about that, and I realized that actually a lot of the people that we're dealing with now in the war on terrorism are local fighters who don't really care that much about global issues. They're all about protecting their local society from what they see as the encroachment of damaging external actors. But then you've got that very small proportion of people who are, like these 2 Arabs in West Java, not necessarily that interested in local people's issues. They're more interested in exploiting those local people to further their global agenda.
So you end up with a sort of global, anti-Western, internationally minded terrorists like Al-Qaeda in a vanguard, sort of, but linking their big fanatical cause with local people, the people who you call accidental guerrillas, people who have much more understandable grievances. So fighting that means splitting those 2 people apart, not allowing that vanguard to exploit the local grievances?
Primarily, yeah. I think it means taking some really substantial and almost entirely non-military steps to deal with local people's grievances and to bring governance, development, the rule of law, and all those sorts of things that we tend to take for granted in the West to people that need them. But they have to be done on a local basis and in accordance with local standards, because when we turn up and try and lay down the law about how things should be, it tends to make these people more vulnerable to extremists coming in and saying, what are you siding with these guys for? You know, when you should be standing up for your own rights. So I think we have two classes of enemy: a very, very small but very violent and fanatical group that hates the West and wants to bring us down, and then about 90 to 95% of the other people that we're dealing with just don't like us being in their face.
It makes so much sense to me, and it's academically and intellectually elegant. It also just resonates with what I understand about what we've gone through as a country for the past 8 years since we've all been paying attention to this. But doesn't that mean that the solution in a place like Afghanistan, where we've already been for 8 years, is massively expensive and takes tens, if not hundreds of thousands of troops, and takes a very long time?
Well, there's a couple of issues there. I think we need to separate doctrine from strategy. Now, what John Nagel was talking about last night is doctrine. And doctrine tells you how to do things. It doesn't tell you whether to do them. Strategy is about making decisions. And I use the analogy of, let's say you're building a pipeline across the desert. You need some kind of guide or handbook that tells you, you know, you need this many bits of pipe and this many rivets and so on to build it. That's the doctrine. But that doesn't tell you whether to build this or that particular pipeline, right? So what we did in 2006 in putting together the counterinsurgency handbook, and what we did recently in the State Department in putting together one for policymakers, is try to say, look, if you decide to do this, these are the sorts of things you need to have in place to make it work. That's not about whether we should or shouldn't go into any particular place. And I think if you listen very carefully to the pronouncements that Vice President Biden, Richard Holbrooke and others have made about this administration's policy in relation to Afghanistan, they're saying, and the key phrase is, we want to have achievable objectives and adequate resources. I think it's a very, very sensible way to be thinking about it.
I wait with bated breath. David Kilcullen, military strategist, author of The Accidental Guerrilla, Fighting Small Wars in the Midst of a Big One. It's really nice to meet you. Thanks for coming in. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Rachel. Good to see you.